The day our divorce was supposed to be finalized, my emotionally constipated ice queen wife looked at me with pure undiluted disgust and then thought at full screaming volume straight into my skull, "Hubby, no, say no. Hubby, if you sign that I'm going to fake 3 separate medical conditions. If I say my tummy hurts, will you carry me? A face card like mine that never declines and you're letting me walk." Not one muscle moves on her face. "You are mine. I feel several things for you and half of them are illegal in this state. I want forehead kisses and cuddles and to grow old being annoying at you. Hubby, I would commit federal crimes to keep folding your laundry. If you sign those papers, I will lie down in the driveway and become part of the property so you legally can't leave." She hasn't blinked. "Statistically, I am the best thing that ever happened to you. Skin flawless, legs infinite, loyalty pathological. A body people write bad poetry about and I'm choosing to waste all of it exclusively on you who won't even fight for me right now. That's devotion. If some stranger scrapes me off the sidewalk, they are absolutely not returning me. No, don't sign, drop the pen, drop it. I'll trade you my kidney, marble face." Zero movement. Serene as a woman signing for a package. And that's the moment it clicks. The mouth is lying, the thoughts aren't, and the coldest woman I've ever known is a love-struck disaster in a trench coat, which means someone counted on me never finding out. Someone scripted my ice queen and forgot I could hear the outtakes. Let me back up 90 seconds to before my skull became a public radio station. We were on the 41st floor of a law firm named after 3 men who have never once split a check. Everything was glass. The table was glass. The view was glass. Even the water pitcher was the kind of glass that costs more than my last honest paycheck back when I still had a job people respected instead of a marriage people pitied. The table threw my reflection back at me. Brown hair combed flat, blue eyes that had learned to give away nothing. A man dressed one deliberate tier below the room. Across from me sat Vera, my wife's family lawyer, a woman built entirely out of clean lines and billable hours. She had laid the settlement in front of me the way a surgeon lays out instruments. To my left, at the head of a table he did not own, sat Silas Nixon's uncle, the man currently wearing the Vane family fortune like a borrowed coat. Silver at the temples, a smile stapled on straight. He had the warmth of a heat lamp in a morgue. And leaning by the window, admiring his own reflection with the devotion most men reserve for other people, was Damon, Silas's protege, the replacement. He had the kind of jaw you could open mail with and the kind of eyes that had never once been asked a hard question. He kept smiling at me like my divorce was a party he'd catered. The story everyone in that room agreed on was simple. Noah married up. Noah married an heiress. Noah was a gold-digging nobody who'd finally been found out. And now the family was generously letting him leave with his dignity and a modest sum, provided he signed here, and here and disappeared into whatever nothing he'd crawled out of. It was a good story. It had a beginning, a middle, and a fall guy. The only problem with it was that I used to take companies apart for a living, quietly, forensically, from the inside of a spreadsheet, and I know a manufactured story when I'm sitting inside one. I just didn't have proof yet. Proof is the only thing I've ever really believed in. Proof and apparently, as of 90 seconds ago, telepathy. "Whenever you're ready, Noah," Vera said, and slid a pen across the glass. It was a nice pen, heavy, the kind you buy to make signing away your life feel dignified. Inside my wife's head the parade caught fire. Don't. Okay, backup plan," I faint, he panics, "we go home, I recover in exactly 4 days, we forget this happened." Her face said nothing. Her face said tax audit. Her face said closed for renovations. I picked up the pen. I did not sign. "Before I do anything," I said, in the voice of a man discussing weather, "I'll want my own counsel to read the asset schedule." Silas made a sound like a laugh that had been kept in a cellar. "Noah, there's no need to complicate a kindness. It's not complicated, it's a Tuesday. I'll have someone read it and we'll reconvene." I set the pen down. That's all. Vera's expression didn't change, which is how I knew it had. Silas waved a hand, let the mouse have his little run around the wheel. He can't read a balance sheet anyway. He genuinely believed that. It's the most expensive thing he owns, that belief, and he doesn't even know he's paying for it. Across the table, Nix's hand had gone tight around the edge of the settlement, knuckles pale as her hair, and underneath the marble her voice cracked into something small. "Please look at me, please." I don't know how to say any of the loud things quietly, so I reached over and put my hand over hers. "You're gripping the paper," I said flat, practical, "you'll crease it." I told myself it was to keep up appearances. That's a lie I'll allow myself. The truth is she'd asked and I'd heard and my hand moved before the rest of me had a vote. Her thoughts went completely, gorgeously offline. He touched me, contact, physical contact, system reboot. Is this a proposal? Are we undivorcing? I'm keeping this hand, it's mine now, I live here under this hand forever. Not a flicker on her face. Serene as a woman signing for a package. I stood, buttoned my cheap coat, and thanked them for their time like they'd done me a favor. On the way out, I gathered the loose pages Vera hadn't formally handed me, including one stray sheet of the asset schedule that had drifted to my side of the glass, and folded them into my inside pocket the way you pocket a receipt you don't need. Except I did need it, because there was a number on that page, and the number was wrong by exactly the kind of margin that ends with people in courtrooms. They really shouldn't have let me read the asset schedule. There is a very specific art to losing on purpose. You have to move slowly, like a man whose spirit has left the building ahead of his body. You have to accept the smaller apartment without negotiating. You have to let them watch you carry your own boxes, because nothing reassures a predator like the sight of prey doing chores. So that's what I did. I took a one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator worked on a mood basis. And I moved myself in over a weekend while the Vane family exhaled. I could feel them relaxing from across the city. The gold digger had been extracted. The kindness had been signed for. Everyone could go back to brunch. Everyone except me, because I had a page in my pocket and a name in my phone I hadn't called in 3 years. Ren picked up on the second ring, which told me he was awake, which told me nothing because Ren is always awake. Ren is a forensic data specialist who dresses like he lost a fight with a laundromat and thinks in 6 directions at once. When we worked together, I was the scalpel and he was the guy who found the body. Noah, he said, you died. I attended the funeral. It was catered by your silence. I need you to look at an entity for me. A pause. I heard him sit up, heard a keyboard drag itself under his hands. You have your quiet voice on. You only use the quiet voice when someone's about to have a bad quarter. A sip of something. Whose bad quarter is it? Family business. I read him the line from the asset schedule. A routing note. A counterparty. A number that had been rounded in the one direction. Numbers are never innocently rounded. Tell me if that company is real. Give me a night. Then because Ren has known me since before I learned to hide anything, are you okay? You married a glacier and moved into a fortress and went dark. Now you're calling me about shell entities at 10 p.m. I'm fine, I said, which was true in the way that a controlled demolition is fine. It's just a Tuesday. I hung up. And because the universe has a sense of comedic timing that would make a sitcom blush, that was the exact moment someone knocked on my mood-based door. Nick stood in the hallway holding a cardboard box the size of a loaf of bread. Chin at its usual 2 degrees tilt, wearing a coat that cost more than my new lease. She did not say hello. She said, you left things. I looked at the box. I happened to know I had not left anything because leaving is the one thing I do with military precision. Inside her head, the confession was already collapsing under its own weight. Okay, so technically I packed this box myself. Technically, these are my things that I put in a box to have a reason. That charger is mine. That book is mine. I have never owned a book. If he opens it, he'll know. Don't let him open it. Act natural. What is natural? I've never done natural in my life. Thanks, I said, and took the box. It weighed nothing. It contained a phone charger, a paperback with the spine still crisp, and a single sock that was definitely aggressively not mine. Look at his stupid perfect face doing that calm thing. He's not even going to invite me in. Fine. Fine. I didn't want to come in. I wanted to come in so badly I rehearsed it in the car for 40 minutes. I have infinite legs and a face card that never declines and I am standing in a hallway that smells like someone microwaved a decision. That was when the sky, which had been gray all day in a threatening way, made good on the threat. Rain came down like the building had been unplugged and the hallway window was open and the gust drove a sheet of it sideways straight at her. I heard the thought before the water reached her. Don't let it ruin my hair, please. Not the hair. And I moved without deciding to, stepping in and pulling one side of my coat around her shoulders, turning us both so my back took the spray. There are photographers on this street, I said, which was practical, which was true, which was not why I did it. Don't give them a picture. For one full second she was tucked against me dry under the cheap coat and her entire interior went quiet the way a stadium goes quiet before it detonates. He smells like the inside of the word safe. This is basically a wedding. There's no officiant, but there's rain and a coat and a man being annoyingly heroic. That counts. I'm counting it. I live here now under the coat. This is my home. Do not let me cry. Crying is for people with less impressive bone structure. Her face, of course, said nothing. Her face said mild inconvenience. Her face said I have a meeting. Then she stepped back, smoothed the coat off her shoulders like it had insulted her, and said in the flattest voice in the northern hemisphere, "You should get that window fixed." And she walked to the stairs, spine perfect, and did not look back and thought about looking back the entire way down. I closed the door. I said her nothing walks on the counter, and I did not let myself feel the thing I was not going to let myself feel, because feelings are unaudited and I don't sign for unaudited things. Ren called at 6:14 the next morning. I know it was 6:14 because I was already up staring at that routing note like it owed me money. "Okay," he said, and there was no joke in it, which from Ren is louder than a scream. That entity is real. It's registered. It files just enough paperwork to look bored. But Noah, it was incorporated 11 days before your wedding. It has exactly one asset, and that asset is a slice carved off the vein holdings that has been very quietly walking out the back door for 3 years. I looked at the box on my counter, the sock that wasn't mine, the book with the crisp spine. "Send me the incorporation documents," I said. "Already did," and Noah, another pause. "There's a signature on the filing, first one before it got clever. The worthless page they'd let me keep hadn't been a page at all. It was a loose thread, and somebody had left it hanging whole sweater. A new power comes with no manual, which is inconsiderate, so I spent 3 days writing my own. Here is what I learned." I could hear Nix's thoughts, but only hers, and only when she was close: a room, a car, the length of a dinner table. Past that, the signal frayed into static, like a station you lose going under a bridge. And the stronger she felt something, the louder it came through, which meant her feelings had a volume knob, and someone had snapped it off at maximum years ago. I tested the range like a man checking for a gas leak. I stood at one end of a hallway, nothing. I walked closer, a murmur. "Closer, my darling is here. Why is he pretending to read that plant?" I was, in fact, pretending to read a plant. The science was sound, none of which would matter unless I could point it at something. And 8 days after I didn't sign my divorce, the Vane Group handed me a target, the quarterly shareholder reception, the kind of event where rich people applaud numbers they don't check. As Nix's still legal husband, I was still barely on the list. Silas hadn't removed me. Removing me would have meant admitting I existed, so I put on the good watch and the cheap suit, and I went to watch my enemy speak. The ballroom was the temperature of a wine cellar and twice as smug. Damon was there, orbiting Nix like a moon that had read one book about gravity. Silas worked the room, shaking hands two-fisted, the way men do when they want you to feel held rather than counted. And Nix stood by a pillar in something white and merciless. White hair swept up, red eyes cool enough to chill the champagne from across the room, being spectacular at people. Her face did its marble thing. Her mind did not. Why is he here? In that suit? That suit should be arrested. He looks like the concept of competent, and I want to file a complaint. I drifted into range and let her run. This is the part nobody warns you about with eavesdropping. Most of it is weather, but you sit through the weather because sometimes folded into it there's a forecast. Silas is going to lie tonight. He's going to stand up there and say the acquisition write-down was $300 million. I heard him rehearse it in the studio with Vera. It wasn't $300 million. I saw the real page on his desk before he covered it. I'm not stupid. I just look expensive. It was $3 billion. $3 billion. He's skimming a decimal place like it's a garnish. I did not change my expression. This is a skill. You learn it holding a losing hand across a table from people who count your blinks. Because here was the thing. A private routing note, the kind Ren had traced, is a whisper. You can argue with a whisper, but a number said out loud on a microphone to 300 shareholders and a court reporter's worth of witnesses, that's a signature you can't wash off. If Silas was about to say $300 million and the truth was $3 billion, he was about to hand me a lie with a timestamp. I got myself a glass of water I didn't drink and a position near the front I didn't need, and I waited for a man to incriminate himself in formal wear. He took the small stage at 8:40. He thanked everyone for their partnership. He talked about stewardship, which is the word people use when they've been helping themselves. And then smiling like a heat lamp. He said, "This quarter we absorbed a write-down of roughly 300 million on the Halden acquisition, well within projections." 300 million. Behind her pillar, Nix's thoughts went cold and precise for exactly one heartbeat. "There it is, 3 billion, you liar." I have the real number in my head and no one to give it to before snapping back to the important business of glaring at my tie. 3 billion said 300 million on a microphone in front of the SEC's favorite kind of witnesses. I had a receipt now, not a whisper. A receipt dated, witnessed on the record, waiting for a forensic man to walk it back to the shell company that ate the missing 2.7 billion. I let it settle into the ledger I keep where other people keep feelings, and then I noticed Nix had gone quiet in a different way. Her mind had dropped from riot to a small thin sound, and when I looked she was pale under the marble, one hand braced on the pillar. "Too hot in here. Everything's loud. I hate that I feel things at these. I hate that the one person who ever made the loud quiet is standing right there being unavailable." I crossed the 3 steps between us before I'd finished deciding to. I put the back of my fingers to her forehead, then her cheek, the plain diagnostic motion of a man checking a fever, and because her thought had asked, and I am apparently powerless in exactly one direction. I let my hand linger a half-second past medical necessity, thumb at her temple, tucking one strand of white hair back where it belonged. "You're warm," I said, "sit down for a minute. You'll pass out and dent the floor." Her entire interior blue-screened. He touched my face, diagnostic touch. That's a touch. That counts. That is a touch that happened. I have been touched by the forehead toucher. Do it again. Do it. Why is my body a traitor? Why do I feel seen? I am an ice queen. Ice queens do not get their temperatures taken by their estranged husbands and enjoy it with their whole. "Do it again," her face said, mildly annoyed. Her face said, "Get your hand off me." Her mouth said flatly, "I'm fine." But she sat, and she didn't tell me to leave, and for one uneven second before the mask reset, she looked at me like she was trying to solve me. Like the kindness didn't fit the story she'd been sold, and she couldn't figure out where to file it. I went home before I could file it either. Ren texted while I was still in the elevator that worked on a mood basis. "Halden, write down. Public filings say 300 million. You good?" I typed back 3 words because 3 words was all it needed. He said 300 million. Then I looked at the ceiling of a rising elevator and let myself smile once in private where it couldn't be used against me. She knew it was 3 billion. And Uncle Silas had just handed me the first receipt with his own mouth. When a stalled man won't leave, you stop offering him kindness and start manufacturing a crime. The summons came as a courtesy, which is how you know it wasn't one. Silas requested my presence at the Vane estate to resolve an irregularity before the shareholder vote 6 weeks out now. The clock everyone was pretending wasn't ticking. I put on the cheap suit. You don't dress up to walk into a trap. You dress like the trap already worked. They received me in the library because men like Silas believe books make lies more credible. He sat behind the desk. Vera stood at his shoulder with a folder. And Damon lounged in the good chair, one ankle on one knee, radiating the confidence of a man who has never been the smartest person in a room and has never once noticed. "Noah," Silas said, warm as a morgue. "We have a problem and I'd like to solve it quietly for Nix's sake. Everything cruel that man has ever done he's done for someone's sake." Vera opened the folder and slid it across. "A loan agreement, my name on it. 400,000 drawn against a marital account 18 months ago and never repaid money the paper implied I'd quietly taken and hidden." The gold digger finally caught with his hand in the drawer. "We'd prefer not to involve the authorities," Vera said in the tone of a woman who had already drafted the referral. "Sign the original settlement, waive your claims, and the loan simply resolves. Otherwise, this becomes a criminal matter and criminal matters are so public." It was clean work. It was almost good. The signature was a decent forgery. The account was real. The dates lined up. If I'd been the man they thought I was, a nobody who couldn't read a balance sheet, it would have buried me. But I'd read a lot of balance sheets. And the thing about a forged trail is that somebody has to lay it, and people always leave a heel print in the wet cement. The door opened before I could answer. Nix came in uninvited, unhurried, holding a coffee she had no intention of drinking, wearing boredom like a second coat. "Oh, we're doing the fake loan thing. I heard Uncle rehearsing this too. He does everything out loud in that study. He thinks the walls are loyal. This is so beneath me. Also, that's the wrong account. And if my idiot husband were paying attention, why is he so calm? Be less calm. I can't flirt with a calm crisis, uncle, she said flat to the window. You're boring the help a beat. And that account was closed the summer before last. I remember because you made me sign the closure myself. She sipped the coffee she wasn't drinking. If Noah drew on it 18 months ago, he did it on a debt account. Impressive for a nobody. She said it like an insult. It landed like a shield. She had in one bored breath put the first crack in their own paper and made it sound like she was on their side. I would have kissed her. I filed that under later in the ledger next to everything else. An oversight in the paperwork, Vera said smoothly, but I saw her recalculate. It's not an oversight, I said, first words in 5 minutes, quiet. May I? I turned the loan document around. I did not raise my voice because I have never once needed to. I walked them through it the way you'd walk a child through why the stove is hot. The account was closed, Nix was right, and there'd be a bank record proving it dated and notarized. So, the $400,000 hadn't moved through it at all. It had moved through a bridge account, a temporary one open to make the forgery land, and bridge accounts need an authorized signer, and authorized signers leave a name. You built this in a hurry, I said, which is fine, but whoever opened the bridge account used their own credentials to do it. Bank portals log the device, the IP, the login. I let that sit. It's all retrievable. It always is. Silas didn't move, which was the correct play. Silas hadn't opened it. Silas is careful. Silas builds machines and stands 10 foot back, but Damon shifted in the good chair, just an inch. The confidence flickered the way a bad bulb flickers right before you learn it was always going to. There it is, sang the broadcast delighted. He opened it. Of course he opened it. Uncle would never touch the keyboard himself. He made the golden retriever do it, I imagine, I said standing buttoning the cheap coat, that if anyone pulled the logs on that bridge account they'd find a single set of credentials, and I imagine those credentials wouldn't belong to the man behind the desk. I looked briefly, pleasantly at Damon. Careful matter. Very public. The room understood before Damon did, which tracks. We're finished for today, Silas said, and the warmth had gone somewhere to cool off. I walked out. Nix fell into step beside me in the hall, still holding the untouched coffee, spine perfect, and her thoughts were doing something complicated and bright. I helped. Did he notice I helped? I helped my husband commit a legal murder and it was the most intimate thing we've done in a year and he didn't even hold my hand or something. We just did crime together. That's practically a honeymoon. At the top of the stairs, the marble floor had been polished to a skating rink by staff who feared Silas more than physics and I heard her think, don't slip. Not in front of him. Dignity, before her heel found the exact wrong inch. I took her hand, steadied her, kept walking like it was nothing, like it was a banister. She did not let go at the bottom of the stairs. She held on for 4 extra steps and then 3 more and inside her head a single sentence looped like a hymn, hand acquired. Permanent now. We don't discuss it. We don't discuss it. We do not discuss it. Out on the drive I let go because letting go was the part that kept us both safe and I got in my car and did the math that mattered. Silas built the machine. That was clear. But the machine had been assembled sloppily in a rush by hands too vain to wear gloves and those weren't Silas's hands. Damon was the loose bolt, greedy on his own account, cutting his own corners, leaving his own prints. You don't waste a loose bolt. You wait. And when the whole thing is spinning fast enough you reach in and pull it and you let the machine tear itself apart around the hole. I'd be coming back for the bolt. When you can't buy a man and you can't frame him, you try to embarrass him to death. 5 weeks before the vote, the Vane Group threw its annual foundation gala, a charity event in the sense that everyone there was charitable to themselves. Silas made sure my invitation arrived. That should have told me something. Silas doesn't do anything by accident. He'd invited me the way you leave a chair out for a man you intend to pull it from under. Nix and I were seated together because the family still needed the world to believe we were amicably separating and nothing says amicable like assigned seating. She arrived in silver, luminous, and remote and thought, the second she saw me, oh no, the suit, the watch. He wore the good watch. He's trying to kill me specifically before arranging her face into something you could store meat behind. The trap sprang at dessert. Silas rose to speak, glass in hand, and somewhere in the warm mush about legacy and family he pivoted smiling to me. And of course we're joined tonight by Noah, who whatever else one says certainly married well. A ripple of laughter, the cruel kind that costs nothing. Some men build fortunes, others simply marry into them and hope no one checks. He raised the glass an inch. To ambition. 300 faces turned to watch the gold digger curdle. I did not curdle. I lifted my water, inclined my head a precise degree, and smiled like he'd complimented my tie. Because here is what a lifetime of losing hands teaches you. The man who flinches is the story. The man who doesn't is a question, and a question is much harder to seat at the end of a table and forget. Let them look, I'd rather be a question. But beside me Nix had gone rigid and her broadcast wasn't laughing. How dare he, in front of everyone? My husband, he doesn't even know. He thinks Noah took from us. He doesn't know Noah is the only one who never took anything, and I can't say it. I can't say one loud thing. My whole life is a beautiful locked room and I'm spectacular in it and I hate it. I hate it. Don't let me shake. Not here, not in silver. Her hand was flat on the tablecloth, trembling just under the marble. And no one in that room could see it but me. Because no one in that room had ever bothered to look. So I put my hand over hers again, not to steady a pen this time, not to keep her upright on a staircase, just to cover it, to hide the tremor from a room full of people who'd have loved to find it. I leaned in half an inch. The picture of a husband murmuring something dull about the dessert course. Breathe, I said very quietly. You're the most composed person here. Let them think it's beneath you. It usually is. Her mind, which had been shaking, went still, then soft, then briefly sincere in a way it almost never let itself be. He's covering my hand so they can't see. He built a wall out of one hand. I'm behind it. I'm safe behind the man they think is nothing. When did he get so no, do not cry. If I cry my mascara runs and then I'm a tragic raccoon in silver and there are photographers. Protect the face. Protect the okay, but keep the hand there. Keep it. The hand can stay, her face said, unbothered heiress. Her mouth said to the table at large, the dessert's overcooked. And under my hand the tremor stopped. We got through it. That's what people like us do. We get through it and we save the feeling for a room with a lock. The room with a lock turned out to be a side parlor Nix led me to afterward, ostensibly to wait for the car. Ida was there. Ida has run the Vane household since before Nix could walk. A small, upright woman with a spine like a closed door and eyes that miss even less than mine. She half-raised Nix. She had never once liked Silas and she had, I would learn, been waiting years for someone with the right hands to walk in. Mr. Noah, she said and pressed a flat parcel into my grip like she'd been carrying it a long time. Her father gave me this to keep. He said give it to the one who counts things. I always thought that was a strange way to describe a person. Her eyes flicked over me, the still hands, the cheap coat, the watch. I don't think it's strange anymore. Inside was a copy of a trust instrument. Run, on the phone 20 minutes later, walked me through what my eyes had already flagged. Nix's father hadn't been a fool. Somewhere near the end, before the stroke took his words, he'd suspected his brother. So, he'd wrapped Nix's controlling shares inside a protective trust. Couldn't sell, couldn't dilute, couldn't consolidate with one lock on it. The trust true ownership could be confirmed and released to Nix by exactly one mechanism, an independent forensic audit of the Vane books formally entered before the board. Not a lawsuit, not a vote, an audit, accounting of things. He'd left the empire's real key inside the one act his careful book-building brother could never survive, someone opening the ledgers and reading them out loud. Noah, Rin said softly, he built a lock that only a forensic accountant can pick. And then his daughter went and married one, I said, she married one. Across the parlor, Nix watched me hold her father's last quiet act of war and she didn't know what it was and her thoughts had gone gentle and lost. He's counting something again, he does that. He gets very still and the whole world reorganizes behind his eyes. I married a man who reorganizes the world and I threw him a divorce. I'm an idiot, a gorgeous, catastrophic idiot with infinite legs and no sense. Her father had seen all of it coming. He'd loaded a gun, hidden it in the paperwork and sealed it behind a lock that needed a specialist's hands. He'd just forgotten to mention to anyone that he'd already married one into the family. 4 weeks out, my wife declared war and forgot to tell me she'd done it. I only knew because the intel started arriving. A text with no greeting, Uncle moved the Tuesday meeting to the yacht. Nothing else. Then 2 days later, a photograph of a calendar page taken at an angle only a person pretending to admire a vase could manage. Then at a family lunch I wasn't invited to, she sat close enough to Silas' phone to read a name off it and close enough to me afterward to think it at full volume until I wrote it down. She decided which side she was on. She just expressed it the way she expressed everything, obliquely, magnificently, and without once admitting to the feeling underneath. Reese was the name off the phone. Reese is a board member built entirely out of nerves and expensive shoes, the kind of man who signs what's put in front of him and then can't sleep. Silas had used him for years as a rubber stamp. Which meant Reese had stamped things, which meant Reese knew things. And a man who knows things and can't sleep is not an asset. He's a leak with a pulse. Ren found him in a parking garage on level 3 because that's where frightened men go to make calls they don't want logged. I didn't threaten him. Threatening is loud, and loud is a confession of weakness. I just laid 3 documents on the roof of his car: the Holden figure he'd stamped, the bridge account he'd never questioned, a wire he'd initialed without reading, and let the paper do the talking. You didn't build this, I told him, but your name is inside it. When it comes apart, and it's coming apart, there are 2 kinds of people in the wreckage: witnesses and defendants. I'm offering you the good chair. He took 40 seconds and every one of his remaining certainties, and then he gave me his phone and a promise he'd wear a recorder to the next sit-down with Silas because Silas, careful as he was, had one weakness that no amount of caution could fix. He liked to be admired for his own cleverness, and admiration requires an audience, and audiences hear things. That was the machinery. Here's the part one didn't have a spreadsheet for. Nix and I fell into a rhythm those weeks. Strategy sessions disguised as neutral coffees, her feeding me what she'd gathered, me pretending I couldn't already hear half of it, and somewhere in there she started watching me. Not the way you watch a man you've divorced, the way you watch a magic trick you're determined to catch. Because I kept knowing things. She'd think she was cold and I'd move her tea near the radiator. She'd think the light was in her eyes and I'd shift the blind. Small things, too many small things. He does it every time with the broadcast narrowing, every single time. Either my husband is the most attentive man alive or I've lost my mind, and my mind is a very expensive piece of real estate. I would have noticed it leaving. And then one afternoon at my terrible kitchen table, she decided to test me. I felt it happen. Her mind went quiet and deliberate, a hunter holding still. Okay, if he's really this, if he's still, I won't say it. I'll just think it. If he can somehow tell if this is real and not me being a romantic disaster, he'll say the thing he used to say when a day beat me. You did fine. 3 words. He hasn't said them in a year. If he says them now unprompted, I'll know. I'll know he's still in there. Go on, say it. Say I did fine, and it stopped me cold because I heard the whole thing and every instinct I owned told me to give it to her. She'd carried a bad week and a worse family in a room full of people who toasted my humiliation, and she wanted 3 words she was too proud to ask for out loud. I nearly said them. I got as far as the first breath. But 3 unprompted words landing on the exact wish she just made wasn't a husband being kind. It was a confession. It was the one thread that pulled unravels the only advantage I had left, and worse, it was too much, too soon, a truth she wasn't ready to be handed. So I did the harder thing. I stood, took her empty cup to the sink, and on the way back I set my hand briefly on her shoulder, the shoulder, not the words, and said flat, "You're doing fine, all of it. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Not the sentence. A cousin of the sentence. Close enough to warm her, wrong enough to keep my secret. Her interior detonated anyway, and this time it detonated with hope. Not the exact words, but he knew I needed. No, he didn't know, he can't know, I only thought it. Okay, so he's just extraordinarily criminally attentive and still in love with me. That's the only explanation he's still in there. I was right. I'm keeping him. New plan. I'm never getting properly divorced. I'll drag this legal separation out for 60 years out of pure spite and affection. Her face said nothing. Her face said acceptable coffee. But her eyes were bright and she believed now that the man they'd told her was a thief was still somewhere hers. I let her believe the sweet wrong version. It was safer than the true one. The recorder gave me the rest that Friday. Reese wore it to the yacht and Silas flattered, expansive, admiring himself in front of a man he mistook for furniture said more than a careful man should. He named the plan, consolidated the vote, marry Nix to Damon, fold the block. And then he said the thing that turned my stomach to ice water. And if it ever comes apart, Silas told Reese warm as a heat lamp, it won't touch me. The exposure's already priced in. I built the exit before I built the scheme. They can prove every dollar and still never make it stick to my hands. A fail-safe. He'd insured himself against getting caught, which meant proving the fraud wasn't enough. Receipts alone wouldn't finish him. He'd already paid for version of the world where the receipts didn't matter. I'd need the theft, the trust, the audit, and the room all at once, all in the same breath, in front of everyone with no exit left to take. I'd need to do it perfectly. Good thing perfect is the only setting I have. You never break a loose bolt yourself. You let the machine do it. You just decide when. 3 weeks before the vote, run finished. Pulling the bridge account apart and inside it he found something better than Damon's fingerprints. He found Damon's second set of books. Because Damon, it turned out, hadn't been content to be Silas's golden retriever. Somewhere along the way he'd gotten greedy on his own account, skimming a private slice off the top of the very scheme Silas trusted him to run, routing it into accounts Silas didn't know about, stealing from the thief. It was small compared to Silas's operation, but it was Damon's and it was clumsy and it had his prints on every inch of it, which gave me a gift with a bow on it. I didn't need to expose the whole conspiracy to end Damon. That would trip Silas's failsafe and warn the careful man too soon. I only needed to expose the part Silas didn't know about. I only needed to show a paranoid king that his favorite knight had been stealing from him. You don't have to slay a knight when the king will do it for you. So, I made sure the proof reached Silas privately 2 days before the shareholder mixer, an anonymous packet, clean, undeniable, the kind of thing a careful man reads twice and then goes very quiet about. I didn't include a note. Silas didn't need a narrator. He needed a mirror and I'd handed him one showing his own protégé's hand in his own pocket. Then I put on the cheap suit and went to watch a man get cut loose in real time. The mixer was all champagne and soft lighting, the kind of event designed to make theft feel like networking. Damon arrived glowing, certain, already carrying himself like Nix's fiancé, already practicing the toast. He found us near the windows, me and Nix, standing not quite together the way we'd perfected, and he smiled his rehearsed and reflective surfaces smile. Noah, he said magnanimous, a man being gracious to the help, still here, persistent. Inside my wife's head the color commentary began gleeful. Oh, he wore the burgundy. He thinks burgundy is a personality. Look at him all teeth, doesn't even know. Sweetheart, you're a dead man networking and it is delicious. I said nothing worth quoting. I didn't need to. Across the room Silas had seen Damon arrive and Silas's warm morgue smile had gone somewhere private to die. It happened quietly, which is the only way real ruin ever happens. Silas crossed to Damon, put a fatherly hand on his shoulder and murmured something. I was too far to hear it, but I didn't need my ears. I had Nix's and Nix had drifted close enough on purpose to catch the shape of it. He's telling him it's over, she reported thrilled and cold. Uncle just called him a liability. Oh, Damon's doing the face, the math face, the wake me face. He's realizing the account. He's realizing Uncle knows about the private skim. He thinks I don't know that word, but I invented knowing things. Damon's glow curdled by degrees. First confusion, then the specific hunted pallor of a man who has just understood that his patron has read his second set of books. He looked to Silas for rescue and found a closed door with a nice tie. He looked around the room for an ally and found 300 people who had only ever liked him because Silas did. And the engagement, the whole architecture of the Nix and Damon merger Silas had been building toward, evaporated in the space of one whispered sentence. You cannot marry your niece to a man you've just discovered stealing from you. The night was off the board. The smile with the broadcast reverend finally declined. Insufficient funds, please try another suitor. There is no other suitor. I'm keeping the one by the window. That was when I felt her decide something. We were being watched. We were always being watched. And standing there in a room full of people who'd been told I was nothing and she was above me. Nix reached over and took my hand in the open, in the light, where every phone and every eye and every gossiping mouth could see the vain heiress lace her fingers through the fingers of her disgraced husband and hold on. She didn't play it off. That was the difference. No pretense of studying, no dropped pen, no rain. Just her hand in mine, chosen, deliberate, in front of the world that had toasted my humiliation 5 weeks earlier. Let them see, sang the broadcast, fierce and bright and unafraid for once. Let them all see. Let them write whatever they want. He's mine. I picked him. I'm unpicking their story right here on the record. Mine. Photographed that her face for the first time in the entire war matched her thoughts. Not warm, she'd never be warm in public, but certain. A woman making a statement in the only language she trusted, an action, not a word. I held on, because some things you don't file in the ledger. Some things you just let happen in the light. We left before the vultures could ask questions. And in the car, her hand stayed in mine the whole drive. And neither of us discussed it, because we do not discuss it. And both of us were privately unbearably pleased. I should have enjoyed it longer than I did, because I'd solved for Damon and I'd solved for Silas's vanity and I'd solved for the failsafe. But I taught the careful man something in the process, and careful men learn. I'd shown Silas that his night was compromised, that his merger was dead, that the pieces he'd been using to move on the empire were being taken off the board one by a hand he couldn't see. Silas had lost his knight. And a man who's lost his knight and can't find the player does the one thing I hadn't wanted to force this early. He reaches for the queen. I'd taken Damon to protect her. I just made her the last piece he had left to grab. I can audit a lie. I can trace $1 through 9 countries in a shell company named after a dead man's dog. What I cannot do is put my hand on a spreadsheet and make a frightened woman stop being afraid. That's the weapon Silas has found. He'd lost his knight, and careful men who lose knights don't rage, they reach for the one piece you can't hedge. 10 days before the vote, he reached for Nick's. The papers were served at the estate on a Thursday. An emergency petition filed loud to have Nick's declared unfit to exercise control over her own shares. The grounds were a masterpiece of quiet cruelty. Erratic conduct, emotional instability. A pattern of poor judgment culminating in the public and financially ruinous reconciliation with a man legally documented as having defrauded the family. Me, I was Exhibit A. Her choosing me in the light. The thing that had felt like a victory 3 weeks ago had been photographed, and Silas had folded the photographs into a case that she was too unwell to be trusted with her own name. And behind the petition, a whisper campaign already breathing, leaks to the right people that the vain heiress had lost herself. That the family was heartbroken but protective. That someone reasonable, someone like Silas, should hold her shares in trust until she recovered. Just until she recovered. That's the phrase that ends women and families like hers. Just until. It was, I'll admit, a good move. It didn't touch the fraud. It didn't go near the audit. It reframed the whole war as a family tragedy with Silas as the grieving steward, and it put the one thing I actually cared about, her, inside a legal box I couldn't pick with numbers. She called me at 11:40 that night. She never called. Calling required admitting she wanted something. I drove over. Ida let me in without a word and disappeared the way good staff vanish when the room needs privacy, and I found Nick's in the dark parlor, out of the silver and the armor, in a plain sweater, holding the petition in both hands like it might bite. The broadcast when I came into range wasn't a riot anymore. It was small and it was scared, and it broke something in my chest I keep locked. They're going to say I'm crazy. They're going to put it in the papers and everyone will nod, because a woman who feels things is always a little bit crazy to them. And the one time I chose something real, they're going to use it to prove I can't be trusted with my own life. And the worst part is that if they take the shares, they take everything my father built, and he's not even awake to stop them. And I brought this on myself by holding a hand in a room. You didn't bring this on yourself, I said from the doorway. You held a hand, that's not a crime. It's the only sane thing anyone in this family has done in years. She looked up. Her face was doing its marble thing. But her eyes had gone glassy, and the mask and the truth were for once standing very close together. They're going to win, Noah, she said, flat, quiet, the first honest sentence she'd ever handed me out loud. I don't know what you've been doing, but I've watched you do it, and you're good, you're frighteningly good, and it still might not be enough because you can't fight this one with paper. There's no receipt for she's allowed to be a person. Please, went the thought underneath, so soft I almost missed it. Please don't let go of me now. I've spent my whole life being untouchable, and I'm so tired. I can't say it. I can't ever say it. So I crossed the room, and I did the thing she couldn't ask for. I sat down beside her, and I put my arms around her properly, fully, no pretense of steadying anything, no photographers to blame it on, no window, no pen. Just a man holding his wife in the dark while the world tried to take her name. She went stiff for exactly 1 second. Then she folded into it like she'd been waiting a year and pressed her face into my shoulder, and her whole interior, for the first time in the entire war, went completely, blessedly quiet. Then, because she is who she is, it came back online with a single indignant thought: he smells stupidly good. This is not the time. Why does the man ruining me for all other men smell like safety and clean laundry? I refuse. I know I don't refuse. Keep smelling like that. Focus. We're being oppressed. Cry about the oppression, not the laundry. I felt her almost say it. I felt the words climb all the way up. The loud thing, the true thing, the thing she'd been screaming into my skull for 7 weeks and had never once let past her lips. Her breath caught on it. Her hand fisted in my shirt, and then a lifetime of training slammed the door. And instead she said into my shoulder, muffled and furious, "If you tell anyone I called you, I'll deny it." "I know," I said, and held on. I let her believe it was hopeless. That was the hard part, sitting there. Letting her think for one more night that we might lose, because I couldn't tell her yet. I couldn't tell her that Silas had just made the only mistake careful men aren't supposed to make. He'd wanted a private, deniable, tragic little coup. Instead, in his panic, he'd filed on the record in a courthouse, under oath. He'd stood up in a public forum and formally, legally asserted control over Nix's shares. And to defend against that petition, the trust had a mechanism. A challenge to Nix's control could be answered exactly one way, by demanding an independent forensic audit of the Vane books entered before the board to establish who those shares truly belonged to. Silas had spent 7 weeks avoiding the one room I needed him in. And tonight, to grab the Queen, he'd walked us both straight into it, publicly, on his own motion, with no exit left to take. Overreach is the only thing you can't audit your way out of. Now, he'd done it on the record, and in 10 days, in front of everyone, I was going to make him read the books out loud. The morning of the vote, it looked like I'd lost. That was the plan, but it still looked like it. Silas walked into the Vane boardroom with the proxies in his pocket and the unfit petition on the docket, wearing the calm of a man who had counted the votes twice. Nix sat at the far end, spine perfect, mask on, legally days away from being declared too fragile to own her own name. And me, I sat in the back, in the cheap suit, in the seat they give to people who don't matter. Everyone in that room knew the story, the gold digger, the nothing, the husband being kept around out of pity until the paperwork cleared. $300 billion of company, and not one of them wasted a glance on me. I've spent my whole life being the thing nobody looks at. It's the best seat in the house. Silas opened by moving to resolve the family matter first, his petition, his tragedy, his gentle seizure of Nix's shares. And that was when Nix stood. "Before the board rules on my fitness," she said, in a voice you could have chilled wine with, "I invoke the provision of my father's trust. His instrument permits exactly one response to a challenge against my control of these shares." She let it land. "An independent forensic audit of the Vane Group's books entered here now before this board." The room shifted. Silas's smile didn't move because Silas still believed in his fail-safe. Believed he could survive any number, that the exposure was priced in, that they could prove every dollar and never make it stick to his hands. He was even still smiling when the trust's named examiner stood up. "Me. My father," Nix said, "left the audit to be conducted by a qualified independent party of the trustees' choosing." A pause, and for 1 second the marble cracked into something almost like a smile. "I choose my husband, who it turns out used to take companies like this one apart for a living." You could hear the room reframe me. The nobody stood, buttoned the cheap coat, and became, in the space of 1 sentence, the most dangerous man in it. I didn't raise my voice, I never have, I just opened the books. I gave them Halden first. The write-down Silas had announced from a stage as 300 million, sitting in the real ledgers at 3 billion. Said 300 million was 3 billion, on the record, on a microphone, in front of these same faces. The missing 2.7 billion, I walked across the room and into a company that had been incorporated 11 days before my wedding, holding one asset, a slice carved off the Vane holdings, bleeding quietly out the back door for 3 years. Then I played them Reese. Reese, who'd worn a recorder onto a yacht and caught Silas expansive, admiring himself, narrating the entire plan. Consolidate, marry her off, fold the block. And the failsafe, in Silas's own warm voice, I built the exit before I built the scheme. Silas's smile finally understood it was in danger. "That's hearsay in theater," he said, still smooth. "You've shown me numbers, numbers wash off, you will never put my hand on any of it." He was right, that was the terrible, careful genius of him. Every wire was laundered, every signature after the first one buried under proxies in dead men's names. The failsafe held, he'd priced in every dollar except 1 page. "You're correct," I said. "Everything after the beginning is spotless. But you weren't careful at the beginning. Nobody is. At the beginning, it's just a man in a hurry incorporating a little company to catch what he's about to steal." I laid the original incorporation filing on the table. The very first one from before the caution, before the proxies, before the exit. The first signature on the first filing, before you learned to hide your hands. It was his in his own writing. The one careless page at the bottom of 3 years of perfect ones. The failsafe had covered everything but the door he'd walked in through. Then Vera stood up. She'd been reading the room the whole time. Vera reads rooms like balance sheets, and she had just watched the column flip. For the record, she said, coolly cutting her losses with surgical calm, I acted on the instructions of Silas Vane, and I retained copies of those instructions. She set her own folder on the table. I'd like the minutes to reflect my cooperation. A rat leaving a ship with the blueprints under her arm. And Ida, small upright Ida, who had waited years for someone who could untangle the accounts, produced the last piece, the original of the forged loan. The fabricated proof that had branded me a thief and Nick a fool, drafted in Silas's own study. The smear that had started the whole war, reversed in front of the people it had been built to fool. The board went very quiet. Nick sat down beside me in the front now, where she belonged, and under the table, where $300 billion couldn't see, she found my hand and laced her fingers through mine and held on. We're basically running a company together, went the broadcast, giddy and cold and glorious. This is a hostile takeover and a date. He read the books to a room full of sharks and didn't blink once. I married that. I'm never letting go of this hand. They'll have to vote around it. The chair called the question, not the petition that died the moment Silas's own signature hit the table. The real vote, control of the Vane Group. And here is the part Silas never saw because he never once looked at the nobody in the back. The swing didn't come down to the recording or the shell company or even his careless signature. Those damned him. But the board needed one clean, provable reconciliation, one number that tied the public lie to the private theft beyond any argument. One page from the asset schedule showing exactly where the money crossed from the real ledger into the fake one. The page I'd folded into my coat pocket 8 weeks earlier on my way out of a divorce I never signed. I slid it to the center of the table. 8 weeks, 14 receipts, $300 billion, and it came down to the one sheet of paper they'd been kind enough to let me keep. The board voted. Nick voted her father's block, freed hers unshakable. And Silas Vane lost his empire in the quietest room he'd ever sat in to the one man he never bothered to count. The collapse of an empire is quieter than you'd think. No sirens, just paperwork moving in the right direction for once. Within a week Silas Vane had been removed from every position he'd stolen, referred to the authorities on the weight of his own signature, and escorted out of the building he'd treated like a disposable overcoat. The Whisper campaign reversed itself the way Whisper campaigns do. The same mouths that had called Nick unstable now called her formidable because the only thing those people fear more than scandal is being on the wrong side of a winner. The smear against me was retracted in a statement no one would read and everyone would absorb. Vera kept her professional license and lost her reputation, which for Vera is the worst possible sentence. And in a private room at a very quiet hospital, a machine that had been tracking Nick's father's heartbeats for 2 years registered one gray morning the smallest flicker of a man deciding to fight back. Not a promise, just a faint blip. But she cried over it once where only I could see and then denied it immediately. Nick had it all back, the shares, the family name, the empire her father built. She stood in the middle of all that restored fortune. And for the first time since I'd known her, seemed to have absolutely no idea what to do with her hands. We were in the estate library of all places, the room where they tried to frame me. She'd had them clear Silas's desk out entirely, which I appreciated. You never told me, she said staring out the window, her icy composure firmly back in place, how you knew all of it, every trap before it sprang. You were always one move ahead of a man 3 moves ahead of everyone else. She turned. Nobody's that good, Noah, not even you. And I looked at my wife, my brilliant, guarded, catastrophically obsessed wife, who had spent 8 weeks screaming devotion into my skull and never once let it show on her face. And I decided the war was over, which meant it was finally safe to lay my cards on the table. I need to tell you something, I said, and I need you to promise not to hurl any expensive decor. Then I told her everything. I told her that on the morning we were supposed to finalize our divorce sitting in that glass office, I'd started to hear her inner voice. Not her polished public tone, the raw one hidden behind her marble exterior. Her face did something it had never done in all the time I'd known it. It softened and shifted completely. You, she stammered. You thought, I said gently, that if I signed those papers you'd fake 3 separate medical conditions. You wondered if complaining about a stomachache would make me dote on you and carry you around. Her mouth fell open. You loudly resolved that you'd commit federal crimes just to keep doing my laundry. That you'd lie down in the driveway and claim legal stake to the property so I couldn't drive away and leave you. Color flooded her pale porcelain cheeks like a sunrise spiraling into a panic attack. No. No, 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 you heard all of that, the driveway, the kidney offer. I offered you a kidney. I mentally dubbed myself an unbeatable ace in my own head when I thought you couldn't hear a thing. The kidney offer was very touching, I said. Stop talking. Stop, you really heard every single thought? She had gone from unshakable ice queen to a woman wishing the floor would swallow her whole, overwhelmed with mortification. Every thought. Every silly, unhinged, embarrassing little internal monologue. I even caught myself thinking about how good he smells when we're stuck in tense situations. I plan to drag out our divorce for 60 years. He even knows I've compiled a whole folder with photos of his elbows. You don't have a folder of my elbows, I said. But you were actively planning to start one. She let out a strangled, wordless noise. And every time, I went on, because she needed to hear this part most of all. Every time you craved small gestures you were too proud to ask for, someone brushing your hair back, someone standing as your shield in a crowded room, I heard that longing too. The forehead touch, the staircase moment, the gala incident. That wasn't coincidence, Nix. I wasn't unnaturally perceptive. I simply knew what you needed. Because you'd told me 1,000 times over in the quiet voice you only allowed yourself internally. Her embarrassment crumbled away, revealing something vulnerable, frightened and hopeful underneath. Then you've known the whole time how deeply how much I. She trailed off. Decades of training stopped her from blurting out the vulnerable confession. Say it anyway, I said. Just once out loud. I want to hear it plainly. She looked at me, this woman who had always chosen sharp toughness over gentle vulnerability, and summoned every ounce of courage she'd reserved for battles instead of her own heart, and spoke the words. I love you. Her voice trembled, and she hated herself for that shake. I never stopped, not for 1 second. Not even when I almost signed the divorce papers. I love you, you infuriating, calm, world-appending man. And if you repeat to anyone I said it so openly, I will flat out deny every word. I know, I said. And then, after all the terrible years, the toxic family pressure and the boardroom full of opponents betting against her, I gave her the 3 words I'd held back for weeks at that kitchen table, the line she'd once tested me on and I'd refused to rush. You did fine, I told her. Through all of it, you did absolutely fine. Her breath hitched and broke. I love you, too, I said, just as fiercely as you love me, which, for the record, is a legally concerning level of devotion. All the obsessions, the stubborn pride, the driveway hostage scheme, the elbow folder you're determined to make. I heard every chaotic thought inside your head, Nix, and I'm still here, and I will never sign those divorce documents, ever. Her icy marble facade did not crack this time. It simply vanished entirely. All that remained was flushed, flustered, furious, glowing Nix, holding back tears and refusing to acknowledge them. She closed the gap between us and kissed me like she'd been aching to do it for 8 long weeks, and of course she had. I'd heard that longing all along. In that quiet library, with her outward demeanor finally matching the passionate truth she'd buried for so long, one last playful, scheming thought slipped out, unmistakably hers. Okay, new plan. We never leave this room again. I'll have snacks delivered, bring in a lawyer, and maybe add a few more photos of your elbows to my collection. We'll have to step out eventually, I murmured against her lips. Only for more snacks, of course. She froze for a heartbeat, then whispered out loud, equal parts delighted, flustered, and completely mine, this is going to take a lot of getting used to. I know.